it's a bit concerning because you tweeted out this pretty recently. Actually, I'm gonna bring up your tweet because that is a better place to start, and it just makes me a little bit anxious because I feel like I would like to see more people going to church services, but I understand why they don't. They don't really make it cool or fun, or it's not really updated, and it's kind of and a lot of people are turned off with how gay a lot of it has become. So
That's
here's a tweet here from Alex
crazy.
McGillis. Maybe religion, for all its faults, works a bit like a retaining wall to hold back the destabilizing pressure of American hyper-individualism, which threatens to swell and spill over in his absence. And then it says here, unless appeal, it took decades for Americans to lose religion. It might take decades to understand the entirety of what we lost. And then you say, if this is correct, we do not have decades. There is something. I mean, when I grew up going to church, I don't know if you did, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
But it was
Raised
just,
Catholic, First
nobody
Communion.
when you're a kid like wants to go to church. You just go because it's what you have to do. It's like the doing chores.
Yep.
It's like brushing your teeth before you go to bed. It's like you go to church and like, yeah, I would take the prayer slips and I would draw drawings of the female pastor jumping off the roof of the church, and I would try to pass them down and submit them. And my grandma would stop every time and just put them in her purse, but then she saved them, which was like, oh, that's sweet, grandma.
That's even
She
better.
liked my
Oh,
drawings.
I love it. I love it. But yeah, I think that I have a fairly complex understanding of religion, or at least my take on it, I guess. I don't think religion in my estimation, religion is a language. Okay. It's a way in which people communicate. So it is it does form community and it forms tradition. But I think of it as a way people communicate, which is why Catholics can just read the Bible and they have all that they need to know to be a Catholic, really. Like there's all kinds of, seminary and all kinds of like theocracy, or there's all kinds of doctrine and a lot of thought, and a lot of philosophers have studied Catholic ideas and stuff like that. But for the most part, Catholicism is passed from one generation to the next by families and by going to church. You don't have to read a whole lot of stuff to know how to be a Catholic, at least in general. And those structures, that traditions that Catholicism or any religion provide, they do more than just limit people, right? Like that's one of the things that the notion coming from Gen X, which I'm a member of Generation X, we kind of have, is we all looked at religion as kind of a constricting thing, and we didn't give enough credibility to the fact that without rules you can't actually be creative, right? Like you can't think outside the box if there's no box. So you can't actually be creative without having rules, and the rules are there to give you a frame of reference. They're not there to limit you. They're not there to tell you you're not allowed to do this and do that and be this and be that. They're there to give you a frame of reference on how is best to live a life, not specifically for you. It's not personal, but how it's best for people to live. There's plenty of things that it's okay for you to do, but it's not okay for everyone to do. Right. And thank God not everybody wants to do the same thing.
Double dipping, for example.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. It's totally fine.
No one sees you.
Yes. Yeah.
You can get away with it.
That's right. Or if you're by yourself, you can double dip. Or if you're with your significant other, you can double dip. Those kind of things are acceptable, but don't do it at the party.
Right. If it's the other end of the mozzarella stick and you know what I mean? Like
you can even spin it around, but that one you also kind of want to keep quiet because someone else might be like, ew, if they're a little too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a situation where like Societies need rules on how they work because of the fact that we're a democratic republic and we are a liberal society. We can make room for people that don't want to live the way that other people live, but we should, as a society, encourage people to live in traditional ways because those traditions exist for a reason. And we're seeing that without those traditions, society starts to break down. And I think the most clear thing is the fact that you see so much depression and mental illness in young people. Now, whatever the reasons are, I think that it does have something to do with social media, and particularly with social media in your pocket that vibrates, right? Like it's literally like a person tapping you on the shoulder. So there's no putting it down, especially like for me and you and other people that are public figures. It's one thing for, a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, like they're not going to have the ability to just say, oh, it vibrated, I'll leave it alone. Who's that wants to talk to me? I mean, people that have almost no validation, that have never experienced validation by other people, like with the first time they start feeling it from their social group, they're not going to have the ability to manage that. Kids can't do that. You can't, you're ridiculous for expecting kids to be able to do that. Expecting a kid to be able to manage that is like expecting your dog to be able to write a sentence with a pen. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's just not equipped for it.
It's like expecting a fat person to walk past a table of free samples at
You know,
Costco.
you just can't. You can't.
Yeah,
It's expecting me to not eat any ice cream. That ain't happening. You can't. You just ain't gonna happen. Like it's like expecting you to just sit there if your water breaks. That's not happening. Like you're getting up. You're gonna do things. You're gonna be moving. This podcast is over.
This interview. I would not rush you still because I was like, I probably have about an hour. I'll just get a towel. I'll come back.
It's warm. It'll be warm in a sec. Or it's warm. It's not cold. So
I'll wait till I feel a foot coming out. Yeah.
But yeah, like kids can't fight that. Like you can't expect kids to be able to do
They're still learning what their
absolutely.
sources of validation are going to be. They're still being set
100%.
up
100%.
for the rest of their lives.
And so what religion does is it's an insulator on all those kind of things. What the traditions that come from religion, the fact that that piece that was written in the Atlantic, that wasn't written by like some far right winger, and it wasn't in, like it's not written on Breitbart. It's in the Atlantic, which again, I know there are people that are going to be critical of the sources, but you have to have reasonable ideas coming to people from a place where they will accept it. And you're not going to have people that are like Democrats that you want to convince that should vote for some Republicans now because the Democrats have lost your mind. You're not going to get those Democrats to believe that what you're saying is right if you're sending them Fox News pieces, because Fox News has been demonized for 20 years. You have to send them stuff that comes from somewhere they trust. I mean, look, if someone sends me an MSNBC article and they say, "See, Phil, this is the proof," I'm like, "Yeah, okay, whatever, Mr. MSNBC guy." I'm just not going to buy it. So that piece there that people that in the Atlantic, it's worth your time to read because I think that it really hits the nail on the head when it comes to a lot of the functions that religion performs. So whether or not you believe in, for instance, when it comes to Christians, they believe that Christ is the Son of God, right? They believe that he's the Savior. They believe that he died, that he died 3 days later. He rose from the dead and he conquered death. So that way other people, so that way human beings don't have to pay for their sins, so that way they can be forgiven. That's like the religious belief. If you don't believe that, it doesn't mean that there aren't a whole, slew of other positive things that stem from being a Christian or living like a Christian or just living in a Christian community as a Christian with your family as a Christian. And again, I understand that there's always going to be people that are going to try to use religion to force people to do things that you don't want and stuff. But the structure that religion offers is not a net bad. And I think that my generation and probably millennials didn't give religion the fair shake that it deserves.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And now we have the question of now many churches will be closing down, and people are talking about, well, what's going to happen to this real estate, which seems kind of like an icky thing to paw after.
Yeah.
This
Oh
is
my
from
goodness.
religionnews.com. Thousands of churches will likely close down. What happens to the real estate? A new book called Gone for Good looks at the ways that churches could be reused for the public good in the future.
Well, there's this
Experts were
place in
predicting that 100.
God.
Oh, wait, sorry. What were you saying?
Well, there's this place in Pittsburgh called Mr. Small's Theater that used to be a church, and it's a concert venue. We've played shows there. It's pretty sick.
Wow. I was just in a Rainmore and Flanagan today that used to be a bowling alley. I was like, why couldn't they have kept them both?
Right? But I guess the it's hard to set up rooms on the lanes maybe.
Yeah. It just seems kind of dark. The, the idea like to close down and remove a place of worship, like now that's not even an option. Um it doesn't make me feel good. And I think like religion must like much like the nuclear family, it's like it just provides a kind of safety net for people to go when they're having a hard time. And when
Yeah.
those things are broken down, well, what do we have? It just seems like the government wants to be your new daddy, your new
Yeah.
family, your new religion. And then
Yeah, and
if it results in you joining the alphabet cult, well, then that's probably going to be ultimately big pharma. Then is going to be your new religion, your new family.
yeah, when it comes to like the LGBTQ stuff, there's a lot of religion is in there. When you hear people saying things like trans people are sacred, that is without question a religious statement. The way that trans people talk, or the way that they talk about trans people having their gender is akin to having a spirit. And you're just making your body match with your gender, which is like making your body match with the spirit that you have. And that extends into things like the whole furry stuff and all like polyamorous and all of the offshoots of the gender stuff. It's all about, oh, this is what I feel like inside, and so I want my body to align with that. But the way you feel is going to change. So we shouldn't be at the very least, we shouldn't allow people that are under 18, definitely probably under 25. We shouldn't allow those people to transition. The reason I say 25 is because insurance agencies have figured out that about 25, which happens to be when your cerebral cortex is finished actually growing, at about 25 is when it's fairly safe to rent cars to people, because under 25 you make dumb decisions. And it's not trying to be personal or whatever. Your brain is not finished developing, so you should not be allowed to modify your body in a way like double mastectomies, or cutting off your penis and having a whatever they call the fake vagina, neo vagina installed. The term installed.
Having a windsock, yeah, installed. And it's like it's a piss poor replacement for religion, because it's ultimately extremely selfish and
Yep.
self-satisfying. And even people in these trans groups, they're like, "Oh, we're allies, we're support." It's like, no, you're not really supporting each other. It's like it's feigned support just so you can justify your own decisions. It's like
Yeah, and
that's why when someone decides to detransition, they get basically ostracized from the
yeah.
community. They become outcasts.
And another function that the LGBT ideology provides now, which is there was kind of an allegory for it in Maoist China. So during the Cultural Revolution, Mao came up with the concept of red personalities and black personalities. Red personalities were red identities and black identities. And if your father was a capitalist or a business owner, you had a black identity. If your father was an anti-communist, you had a black identity, et cetera. And what they would do is, if you would do revolutionary things, you could get a red identity. You could become a communist, and that would absolve you of the sins of your father, because you would no longer have your black identity. You would have the red identity of a member of the Communist Party. And that's what's going on nowadays with the LGBT whatever ideology or whatever. If you are cis, if you are heteronormative, if your parents are business owners, because those kind of things actually do kind of feed into this. There's a lot of socialist ideology that's mixed in with it. But you can have, if you're a white cis hetero male, you can say, well, I'm bi, or I'm poly, or I'm whatever. Say that you're any one of the low intensity, isn't what essentially boiled down to the low intensity LGBT identities, right? If you're like, I'm bi, and you put on some glitter mascara every once in a while, then you get,
yeah,
and you paint your nails, that'll give you enough to like get out of the, to not get the eye of Sauron looking at you like you're, the bad guy. And so there's a lot of people that are doing that. They'll adopt an LGBT identity because it gets them out of having the bad identities. Just like in Maoist China, you could adopt a red identity to get away from having a black identity, and there's a lot of similarities to Maoist China with the LGBT kind of groups nowadays.
Wow. And I thought, in terms of like gambling speak, don't you want to be in the black instead of being in the red?
You do, but the commies don't like money. So that's part of why they're always in the red, or why the red is bad, because they're always in the red. That's why they don't like money, because they never get into the black.
True. Gosh, it just seems kind of hopeless. Like how do you turn around? How do you get a whole new generation of people to start wanting to go to church again, because so much has been so damaged? Even like more hardcore Catholics have been turned off by the new Pope. Just by how much has been allowed in the church.
So there are some positive things. The like Hispanic people are surprisingly resilient to that kind of stuff, to the LGBT stuff. And that comes from the fact that they still have a very, very strong Spanish tradition, and whether it be, whatever kind. It's like Hispanic people, they have a very significant attachment to their traditions, and that acts as an insulator from these kind of foreign ideologies like the LGBT thing. And that is what it's going to take. So the fact that people don't have a religion or have shared community, that's why the LGBT stuff is so attractive and is being so successful. But the more people push back on it, the more people say, look, no, we're not going to let trans women or trans women, men, into women's sports, and look, this is bad, and we're not going to allow this and allow that. And also, I think society needs to stop. Like, we need to stop celebrating June as like Gay Pride Month. Like, all of the pride stuff needs to end. If the government has any legitimate lifestyle that it's going to promote, it should be the lifestyle that promotes more people and more like having more families. And there's nothing wrong with having an LGBT lifestyle, like living. I'm fine with it. I'm like a libertarian guy when it comes to that. But the government shouldn't be promoting it. The government shouldn't be like, we celebrate this and we need to make sure that this gets focused and blah, blah, blah. No, you should be doing things to focus on families.
What James Lindsay said yesterday, he's like, visibility is not the problem. It's not that they need to become more visible. And he's unintentionally hilarious, James Lindsay. He's like, people seeing more of them is not helping.
No, I mean, well, to be fair, actually, having people see more of them turns more people off. So the visibility is actually something that's working against them, because it really does. Like,
visibility day.
Yeah, right. It's like the back in the closet day. But it's true. Days. Like it shouldn't be something that the government shouldn't be. It's beyond just like gay pride or just pride. It's like all year long, there's all these different days, because the whole LGBT thing, like you said yourself just a little while ago, it's all based on narcissism. It's literally worshiping their own bodies, totally focused on sexuality, their own sexuality. So it's as you know, it's as navel gazing and self-centered and self-absorbed an ideology as you could possibly imagine. It's people thinking about the thing that people think about all the time, which is sex, and indulging in it constantly. That thought, whatever, it's always sexuality and sex, and it's not healthy to be constantly focused on yourself like that. It's pure narcissism.
Exactly. Even as a straight person,
Yeah,
like anyone who's had a phase when they were really into it, whether they were in like, you know, what do they call it? Like SA or like Sexaholics Anonymous or something like that.
yeah,
Whether you're in a formal group like that or not, anyone who has had a phase where they were just obsessed with it, it knows like, yeah, you don't get very much else done. You're not focused on your career, you're not focused on your
yeah,
friends or family.
yeah,
It's like it's just like an addiction. I
yeah.
like this comment from FFS. Church survived almost a century of hardcore communism and persecution during the 20th century in Russia. God's church will always survive. I like that. I like a little white
Well,
pill comment.
there you go. I certainly don't have I certainly don't have an aversion to religion. I didn't grow up and have a negative experience with religion. So I kind of was like, I don't think this is for me anymore when I was like a teenager, but I definitely don't have hostility towards religion. I do have hostility towards anyone that tells me what I'm supposed to do or tell me what like I'm very much like, yeah, as soon as you said I have to, I don't want to. But otherwise, like I welcome the idea of having, a society that's a little more interested in being what amounts to holy or good Christians or however you want to articulate it.